Hi, it's Stefan here in Sofia, Bulgaria, and today I'm very happy to take you on a virtual walking tour along one of the most famous streets in downtown Sofia, Oborishte Street. Actually, more than a century ago, it was even not in Sofia. It was in the outskirts of Sofia, and if you wanted to live in peace and tranquility, that would be the ideal place for your villa or for your home. Well, today this is not exactly the case because practically you are in the heart of the Bulgarian capital. Throughout the years, the most powerful and richest Bulgarians would live along this house. They would be merchants and politicians and traders and spies. And this would be where they'll be rubbing their shoulders. Oborishte Street is today also the street of the famous and rich people. It was the same case during the communist period between the late 1940s and early 1990s, because in the early 1950s almost all of the buildings here, they were confiscated by the state and given to loyal comrades in the Bulgarian Communist Party, or they were given to serve as embassies to friendly states like Libya or Vietnam. Today, it's a street which keeps a lot of secrets, and I'll be happy to share some of them with you. Actually, we are starting our walking tour with one of the most famous public buildings in Sofia. This is our National Library. What you can see is that the building of the library is built in a new classical style. These powerful columns forming a stern colonnade is the main entrance of a place where books are worshipped. A place named after these two brothers, Cyril and Methodius. They're on the monument behind me. They are the inventors of the first Slavic alphabet, also known as the Glagolitic alphabet, and it was done in 855. So the building was constructed in the early 1950s. That's why you can see the very typical for the early communist period new classical style. But it is interesting that the construction actually started years ago. It started in 1930s. So it is one of the very few buildings, public buildings in Sofia, which construction started before World War II, when Bulgaria was a monarchy, and finished after the end of the war, when we were the People's Republic of Bulgaria, run by the Bulgarian Communist Party. So you see the main entrance here, you see the columns, but just wait to see what's lurking behind. And it's not horses. Why I'm mentioning horses? Because before the building of the library was built here, it was a place which was used for exercises with horses. It was used by the Bulgarian cavalry, by the Bulgarian royal family as well, and this was a place where you would go if you loved horses. Today, you come here if you love books. So let's go and check what's behind. So remember when I told you that the back of the National Library is completely different? Look at the facade here. It has nothing to do with the new classical style at the front. It is a very fine example of modernist architecture of the 1930s. Why is that so? As I told you initially, the building was designed in 1930s. Of course, afterwards there were some changes that was made, but some elements were kept, like here. Actually, if you see closely, you see again the lack of elements, but the modernist style is present. There's nothing classical here, no neoclassical style. So the building is kept with two faces. Now we are the back face of the National Library. Just across the street from the National Library is situated this building. Actually, this building has been recently renovated, but it was constructed in the late 1920s and it was opened in 1930. Actually, this is the building of an Italian charity known as Opera Pro Oriente. Actually, one young Italian priest came in Bulgaria right after the end of the First World War to take care of the bodies of the Italian soldiers. But he fell in love with the Bulgarians, so he decided to establish a charity which would give home and education and scholarships to young and promising Bulgarians. This was the initial use of the building that you can see, but it was not always the case. The property was seized by the communists in the end of the 1940s, and then it became a national music school. And it remained this till the 1990s. Today it's a private building, and what is interesting is that at the back of the building there is still a Roman Catholic chapel which is open for masses every Sunday. So one of the few places where Catholics could come here in Sofia for their masses. Imagine walking along this street in the late 1940s. 1943, the Bulgarian king Boris III died. Just a few years later, the Bulgarian royal family was expelled from this country. But before being expelled, there was a small chapel which was situated at the back of these blocks of apartments that you can see today. And it was frequently visited by the Bulgarian queen, Ioana, or Giovanna of Savoy. All dressed in black, she would come every single Sunday to attend the liturgies. And when she attended the liturgy for the very first time, before the royal family left Bulgaria by direct order of the communist authorities, the contemporaries would write that this street was full of people dressed in black mourning the departure of the Bulgarian queen. And actually one of the only few remnants remembering these times is the gate. This gate, which nowadays is closing a set of parking lots and garages behind me, is the original gate which kept the presence of the Bulgarian queen Giovanna in 1940s. Our next stop here at the corner behind me is not such an impressive building from the 1920s or the 1930s in Bulgaria. Actually, there were such buildings here of rich Bulgarians. But when the communist regime was established in the mid-1940s, and especially the second half of the 1940s, the beautiful houses here, they were razed to the ground with tanks. Why? To open spaces for housing for the new power people of the day, for the highest ranking members of the Communist Party. This is the reason why, if you look closely at this, you see that there's almost no exterior decoration, no ornaments, and it is simply stern architecture where the functionality is what matters most. So it is not only the beautiful palaces here, but also buildings like this. And now we are in front of one of the best preserved houses along Oborishte Street. This is the house of a family with origins not from Sofia but from the small town of Koprishtica. The house of Palavevi, Donchu and Jovka Palavevi. Donchu was a trader, but what was the goods he traded with? Tobacco. Bulgaria was one of the main producers and exporters of tobacco a century ago. So it was quite a good business for the Bulgarian entrepreneurs. The house built in the early 1920s bears resemblance to the Art Deco style. And this is one of the only few remained in this architectural style nowadays in Bulgaria. The house was seized by the communists in the late 1940s, and as it was seized by the communists, it was used as a headquarters for Soviet generals stationed in Bulgaria. Later it became a nursery, and it was given back to the original owners and their heirs in the early 1990s. Today the house is used by the British Council in Sofia, by the Embassy of Croatia and the Embassy of Netherlands. This home was known with its rich interior, with the opulence inside, and that's why it inspired one of the most famous Bulgarian novelists of 20th century, Dimitar Dimov, to write a novel about the tobacco industry in Bulgaria. Novel called in Bulgarian Tutun, translated tobacco. So next door from the embassies and the British Council, you can see a slightly more modern building, which today is the National Music School. Actually, here you can typically hear kids playing musical instruments, singing, and trying to excel in their musical skills. But this building has a slightly different story. The building was built in the early 1960s as a home for the highest ranking members of the Bulgarian Communist Party. On the top floors, it was situated the apartments of the Bulgarian communist dictator Todor Zhivkov, his wife and children. Actually, the idea behind that was to have two circles. The circle around his wife, which were the older comrades, and the circle of the so-called young liberal intellectuals around his daughter, Ludmila. This was the idea that these people could be easily checked about their thoughts of the communist regime, of the economics of Bulgaria, etc., etc. But what is interesting is that in the 1960s, Todor Zhivkov decided that this is not a place for him. So he moved further away from here in one of the confiscated homes of Bulgarian traders. So here there remained other members of the Communist Party. Later, he moved further away in the southern outskirts of the Sofia because, according to the urban legend, there were some poisonous air streams coming from Krmikovci steel plant, situated at that time in the outskirts of Sofia. Can you imagine that the air would be polluted here by the greenery here? It's quite hard. Actually, our communist dictator was getting a bit more paranoid. He was afraid that there could be a possible coup d'etat, so he was trying to be in more secluded places. So today, it has nothing to do with the old communist comrades. It's full of life and vigor and children. So here it is our next stop, which is part of the virtual tour along Oborishte Street in Sofia. So what you can see behind me, this is the so-called Doctor's Monument, built just 5 years after the liberation of Bulgaria from the Ottoman Empire in the early 1880s. This monument is dedicated to all the medical staff who died during the war. More than 500 names of doctors and nurses are on the walls of the monument. But the monument is situated in a splendid public garden, the Doctor's Garden, with different species, with beautiful trees. And actually, when the garden was opened, one of the main gardeners of Sofia, a Swiss man called Daniel Neff, came and worked here in order to have a real piece of heaven. So this is the reason why in the years to follow the garden actually became a botanic garden, which was part of Sofia University. Then in the 1930s it was an open park for every single person who wanted to visit this place. Today it is quite often visited by young families with children. There are nice playgrounds, and also when there are some outdoor birthday parties, this is one of the spots that are preferred. So now off to our next stop. So we continue our walk along Oborishte Street, and here now we are facing like the real palazzos of Sofia. The building that you can see in front of you today is the home of the French ambassador in Sofia, Bulgaria. Actually, it was built in the late 1920s as a home of one of the most mysterious Bulgarians at that time, Angelu Kuyumjijski. Actually, the idea to have such home was practically to have a palace. This is the reason why we have this architectural style. Inside we have these large spaces and fireplaces. But anyway, it was not very convenient. So this is the reason why just a few years later he designed another building and moved away, just a block from here. The building, which you can see, keeps the secrets of Angelu Kuyumjijski. Actually, today we even don't have pictures of him. What we know was that he was a rich man, a banker, a merchant. He had not only Bulgarian citizenship, but a French one and a Belgian one. In the early stages of World War II, he practically disappeared. Many people considered that he was a spy of the American intelligence during the war, and later he miraculously appeared once again, this time in Turkey, in Istanbul in 1943, where they started discussions about how Bulgaria might be able to switch the sides in World War II. Because till this moment, Bulgaria was an ally of Nazi Germany. From then on, we don't know anything about him. But what is interesting is that it's a whole complex of diplomatic houses here. So it's not only the home of the French ambassador that I was talking about, but this small building here is actually the French embassy. Well, make the comparison between the sizes. The residence is larger, and actually what is interesting, in 1989 January, it was the French president at the time, Francois Mitterrand, who arrived here, and right in the middle of the residence he met with Bulgarian intellectuals and dissidents, trying to talk about the communist regime and the possible end of the regime. So, as I mentioned, it's a whole ensemble of buildings. When we pass by the French embassy, the neat building with the green shutters on the windows, this is the residence of the Dutch ambassador in Sofia. But during 1920s, 1930s, it was a home of the Bulgarian equivalent of Willy Wonka. Uh, One man called Slavchev built the first chocolate factory in Bulgaria. Actually, there were two of them, one in Sofia and the other one in Bulgarian town of Slavchev. So, at a time when Bulgarians were not quite sure what the chocolate was, and they would prefer a little bit more oriental style of desserts like baklava, he was the man to introduce chocolate to Bulgaria. Initially, Bulgarians were even quite skeptical about the chocolate boxes. They would say that, oh, we don't want to eat anything like this because they believed that it was a soap. Well, it was not a soap. But if you go one day to the ambassador's residence, no chocolate inside, only diplomats. Okay, and now we have our next stop, and this neat house from early 1930s belonged to a Bulgarian merchant. As you can see, a rich merchant, Georgi Semerjiev. Actually, his father-in-law, Stefan Stefanov, was a minister of finance in the 1930s. Together, they owned almost all factories in Bulgaria involved in the textile industry. Also, he had capitals in the most important and largest Bulgarian factory, Izida factory. So the idea of this home was to have both functionality and at the same time presence in this place. It was both used as a home and as offices. This is the reason why it was built practically to impress. It was a building with its own heating system. They didn't rely on fireplaces anymore, so it was functionality important. But what happened during the communist period here? Again, as many of the other houses along this street, this one was confiscated by the communists. It was given by the Soviets to be used as headquarters. As well, it was later used as an embassy of Vietnam. It was used as a nursery, and finally in the 1990s, it's the same pattern. The house was given back to the heirs of the original owners. Another one of the palazzos on Oborishte Street. Another beautiful home behind me. Actually, the home that you can see today is headquarters of a company, but it was more than a century ago owned by one of the most famous Bulgarian generals. This general, Stefan Slavchev, is considered as the father of Bulgarian artillery. When Bulgaria was involved in numerous wars in the beginning of 20th century, during one of the Balkan Wars, during the siege of Edirne in Turkey, General Slavchev was the man who used for the very first time the powerful artillery of Bulgaria, thus creating an iron curtain for those who were defending the fortress of Edirne. So you can imagine him standing on the nice balcony with cast iron, which is element of the Art Nouveau architectural style of the building, and thinking of new victories on the battlefield. And just a few minutes away from the military school, a lot of houses of high-ranking Bulgarian military are situated in the area. But I would definitely say that the house of General Slavchev is the most elegant one. And as we continue the walk along the street, we can see another building which is included in the list of important architectural sites in the Bulgarian capital. Actually, this house that you can see was the home of Minif family. It's the destiny of Miroslav Minif. Very interesting. He was an intelligent man. He was a lawyer. He was an MP in Bulgarian parliaments, but he also had a literature magazine in the 1930s, early 1940s, where some of the most famous Bulgarian names in literature would publish some of their pieces of literature. But what happened? It is already the first years of the communist regime. More or less, he believed that he was secured because he stood up for the Bulgarian Jewish people, one of the very few high-profile Bulgarians who stood up but supported by the masses. 38 intellectuals wrote a letter to our Prime Minister Bogdan Fiul demanding the stop of sending Bulgarian Jewish people to the concentration camps. And with the support of the Bulgarian people, they managed to do it. But what happened during the communist period? Because of the fact that he was a minister in one of the governments in the 1920s, he was stripped of his titles. He was not allowed to practice his job anymore. But he didn't went into despair. Instead, he tried to find money for his family. So he started laying down pavement and bricks in downtown Sofia. Those intellectuals, there were many. Some sent to the labor camps established by the communist regime, but he still managed to live with dignity. And now we are going to finish this virtual walking tour of Glitzy Sofia, of Oborishte Street, the home of the rich and the powerful, pretty much for the last more than 100 years. Today, Oborishte Street is still one of the most beautiful and elegant streets in Sofia. And being in the middle of this street, this gives you an idea of the history of our capital and the people who lived here. Because in the end of the day, history is always made of the stories, personal stories of the people who lived in those times. Thank you for being with me and see you down the road.